Damian Edwards here from Microsoft. Nice to be back in Australia to talk to you all about ASP.NET Core 2, which just came out, what, yesterday, I think, our time? If you're in my workshop the last 2 days, I may have snuck you the bits a little early, but that's fine. They were privileged people. They came and learned about all the great stuff that I'm going to talk to you about in the next 59 minutes or so. And we'll talk about some of that stuff now as well. How many people are already using ASP.NET Core? Wow, that's awesome. All right, fantastic. Well, hopefully there's some stuff here that you see as an improvement. And hopefully we can address things that maybe are still bugging you about ASP.NET Core. But hopefully you're getting a lot of success with it as well. So good to see. At the end, I hope to have a little bit of time for questions, because usually people have plenty of questions to ask about ASP.NET Core. It's still fairly new, but we'll see how we go. So a quick recap of how we got to where we are now, because the timeline of ASP.NET Core is a little undulating and a little interesting. So we can all think back to when it was still called ASP.NET 5 and that DNX thing. And that's actually the second name. We had a different name before that, but I'm not going to go back that far. I'll just go back to when we were doing betas, which was 2015. So we're only talking 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. But then by the end of that year, we renamed ASP.NET Core 1.0. We released an RC in November, but we also told you that we were going to change everything after the RC. So sorry about that. And then in February, 3 short months later, we released .NET Core. Now that we had a .NET Core, and we kind of rolled ASP.NET Core into that entire release, we called that RC2. And then we told you that we were going to change all the tooling. So Project JSON was kind of still there in RC2, but then we said, don't worry about that. That's going to go away. We're going to reinvent CS Proj. So we're not quite 1.0 yet. And then we released a 1.0 in June last year. So that's not far. I mean, it's only, what, 14, 15 months ago. But we didn't release any tooling. Right? There was still a preview tooling. It was VS 2015. It wasn't the best tooling experience. But anyway, the runtime and ASP.NET Core was out, so you could use it. And then we did a 1.1 release of just the runtime, a full 5-6 months later. But we still really hadn't got anywhere close to getting the tooling to be good enough to call a 1.0 yet. So I think that was the VS 2017 preview before we released RTM. So there was a version of the CS Proj tools, but they weren't great. So it was still recommended that you use the Project JSON tools, because they were the only ones in a supported version of VS. So we're already into our first minor release of the runtime, and we still don't really have a good tooling story. Then we actually released what we consider to be our first real 1.0. So we released .NET Core SDK 1.0 in March this year. So that was really not a long time ago at all, along with Visual Studio 2017. Okay? Now, so we had ASP.NET Core and .NET Core 1.1, dot something by that point, some patch level. And then we finally had a 1.0 version of the tools. So things were finally looking up. So we saw a lot of customers wait until this point before they really jumped on board ASP.NET Core, for good reason, right? I mean, they kind of just went, well, you know what, this is all too much. I'll keep a side eye on this, but I'm not going to really get in there and start using it for real until you can give me a supported version of Visual Studio and a fairly good tooling experience to do so. So that was good. And then at the same time, we announced that this better version of .NET was going to come along, .NET Standard, or this nice new contract that was going to bring back all the APIs that you're all telling us that you wanted. And so even if you thought 1.0 was a good start, but you really saw 2.0 as the beginning of the journey, because that's when all the APIs would come back, you may have still been holding out. And then finally, only a few months after the 1.0, really, we now have a 2.0. So the timeline kind of accelerated. Once we had a whole bunch of churn, obviously, before ASP.NET 5. Leading up to that, it was actually a couple-year effort. And then everything kind of went crazy for a couple of years, and then we landed where we are right now. So we're 1 day into .NET Core 2 and ASP.NET Core 2. We're at VS 2017 15.3. We would have called that Update 3 last year, but now we're calling it 15.3, whatever. I don't know if it's better. People like 15.3 better than Update 3? I don't know. I'm here. People give me both opinions. But we're in a good state. I think we're in a really good place, and .NET Core 2 brings along a lot of great features and fixes a lot of stuff. So hopefully you're not too confused anymore. Now that we're at 2.0, we can kind of forget about everything that came before it, and we can just focus on the path forward. The 2.0 cycle, though, it's worth calling out, as you can see, was fairly short and was fairly focused on some foundational issues. One, missing a crap ton of APIs made it very difficult for people to grasp moving their apps or starting new apps on .NET Core. And so we fixed that to a large extent with .NET Standard 2. Two, the tooling still wasn't particularly great in the VS 2017 story. New CS Proj, new NuGet, new paradigms, and it just hadn't had a lot of time to bake. And so the 2.0 version of that tooling now is much, much better. And I'll show you some of the improvements underneath there as well. Things like startup time for the application, what we call the inner loop performance. This is what you as developers do more than 10 times a day. We classify as inner loop. There's still a lot of work we have to do to make that inner loop experience really as fast as we want it to be. But we've made some really good improvements from the 1.0 to the 2.0 releases. So less about features in 2.0, although I'm going to show you a bunch of features, and a lot more about fixing some of these foundational issues, which is why the timeline from the last sort of big 1.0 release has been so short. All right, so the first one we talked about was .NET Standard 2. Who here has been confused by .NET Standard at some point? OK, good. Well, not good, but good. And who was confused by PCLs or portable class libraries before that? Okay, less people, but we now, in our experience, not as many people had been exposed to PCLs, and so that's not unusual, whereas we've been blasting .NET Standard like from the mountaintop for the last year now, and it can be a little difficult to explain. So just before I jump into this thing, let me just quickly reiterate. .NET Standard is not something that you can run on. It's not a platform. It is not a flavor of .NET, as Hanselman likes to talk about, the different flavors of .NET. It is a target that you can compile against, okay, that you can reference, and then it is a promise that once you've done that, the thing that you've built will run on flavors of .NET that honor or adhere to or are compliant with the version of .NET Standard that you targeted. Okay? It's very much like saying, I'm going to program this API against this Damian interface. All right? And then you can give me any class that implements Damian, and I'll be able to use that. Does that make sense? It's very much like that. Okay? And so in .NET Standard 2, we added, I think it was, I've seen different numbers. It's either nearly 15,000 or just over 15,000. It's a crap ton of new APIs. It more than doubled the API surface of .NET Standard from 1.6, which was the previous version, the one that we shipped with .NET Core 1.0. Okay? Most of those came, nearly all of them, came from .NET Framework. So what we effectively did is we said, let's look at Xamarin, because newsflash, we bought Xamarin last year. Let's look at Xamarin. Let's look at .NET Framework, and let's look at .NET Core, and let's look at the overlap of those API sets. Well, it turns out Xamarin and .NET Framework have many, many, many more APIs than .NET Core, and lots of code out there that runs on those two things. So let's use that intersection as our basis, because frankly, there was kind of nothing in .NET Core, so that was kind of pointless. So let's look at .NET Framework and Xamarin, take that union, see what falls out, and let's add all of that to .NET Standard, or whatever makes sense anyway. And then we went through a review process. It was all up on GitHub. You could follow along. Some of the APIs were tweaked along the way, and then we landed with .NET Standard 2. The short story means most of the APIs that were common have now come back, and you can just use them in your .NET Standard Library 2, your class libraries, which also means you can use them on .NET Core 2, which is great. It means that you can reference a whole bunch of packages that are already on NuGet without them having to be recompiled, which is really, really cool. It does mean that if you're running on .NET Framework, the minimum version of .NET Framework that you need to have now to be .NET Standard 2 compliant is high. It's higher than it was before, because .NET Standard 1X supported lower versions of .NET Framework. So we're talking about .NET Framework 4.6.1, which I'm hoping most people here are at least on 4.6.1. I think there's only one version lower than that that's officially supported, which is 4.5.2. But please be on 4.6.1 or above. That would be great. Xamarin, .NET Core 2, Mono 5, Unity all support .NET Standard 2 libraries. Okay? So you can write .NET Standard 2 libraries, you can consume .NET Standard 2 libraries, and use them on these flavors or these platforms of .NET. Any UWP developers? One gentleman down the back. Well, for you, sir, .NET Standard 2 will be coming to a UWP project near you in RS3, all right? Which I think is called the what? The Autumn Creators, the fall, I don't care, stupid name. The thing that's coming out later this year, all right? Because we're in the southern hemisphere, so fall's not going to be here, or autumn's not going to be here then. So it's coming. You can target .NET Standard 2 and be confident that you're going to get a good future ahead. .NET Standard won't change much, I think, from now on. We're not going to see a rev of .NET Standard every year, because if we do that, all these platforms are going to become a lot more fractured again, right? .NET Framework doesn't ship any quicker than it used to, as you've probably noticed. And so if we start adding APIs and releasing a .NET Standard 2.1, your .NET Framework stuff's going to get left behind again. And your UWP stuff, which ships in Windows, will get left even further behind. Okay, so we really don't want to do that. We want to build a solid foundation, which is what we have now, and then build ancillary or satellite packages, what we call OOBs, out of bands, not in the standard, that you can consume from anywhere because they're based on the standard. All right. Now, there is this compat shim thing too. I don't really talk about it too much, but one of the things .NET Standard 2 enables in the tooling is that if you're, say, in a .NET Core 2 project, you can actually reference packages and DLLs that were compiled against .NET Framework, okay? Even though you're going to run them on Linux via .NET Core 2. And the compiler will just happily let you, yep, that's all good, I'll let you compile that. Now, will they run? Well, they might. It all depends on what that assembly or that package that you've referenced actually does at runtime, right? What does it actually reference? If it references and only calls parts of the .NET Framework that are in .NET Standard 2, it works. It just works just fine. As soon as you hit any part of the API surface that is not in .NET Standard 2, it will explode when you try and run it on .NET Core 2, because that API isn't there. Okay, so if you have a library that tries to load something in WPF, or system.web, or WCF, or system.workflow, or whatever thing else is in there that's in Framework but is not in Core, then you won't be able to consume that in .NET Core 2. But everything else, you can. And I think the figures the .NET team put out say that about, I think it's 70% or so of all the packages on NuGet.org fall within this scope of, yes, you can reference them and they will run happily on .NET Core 2 because they fall within the scope of APIs that are included in .NET Standard 2. Okay? That's pretty cool. All right. Who is currently running ASP.NET Core on .NET Framework rather than running it on .NET Core? Okay, so that's about a quarter, maybe a fifth of the room. So we had a little hiccup when we shipped 2.0 Preview 1, and we had to very, very late cut support for .NET Framework, and then some stuff happened, and now it's back. So it's back in Preview 2 and now 2.0 RTM, which is great. That's supported because of this whole .NET Standard 2 stuff, right? We can target .NET Standard 2 as framework developers in the ASP.NET Core team, and 99.9% of the time, that just means our stuff works. And then there's some very edgy circumstances where we have to explicitly code for .NET Core 2 or .NET Framework, and there are some aspects of the ASP.NET Core 2.0 experience, which I'm going to show you, that only work when you're on .NET Core, because they just rely on features that we've been able to add at the platform level in .NET Core that don't exist in .NET Framework. And I'll talk about those in a minute when I talk about those improvements. As I mentioned before, the minimum version now is 4.6.1. So if you're using ASP.NET Core and you're running on .NET Framework, you want to go to ASP.NET Core 2, you will have to go up to .NET Framework 4.6.1, which I hope you're on already, or newer, okay, or newer. I think it's up to 4.7.1 or something now, so it's good stuff. All right, so we have new project templates. The CLI, the .NET CLI and the VS 2017 now share the same project templates, which is great. So you can all throw a set of project templates, and it's all fully customizable, some great articles about how to do this. You can deliver them via NuGet packages, and then you can have them show up in both the CLI and in VS if you write a VS extension. What have we got new in 2.0 out of the box? We've got SPA templates for Angular, React, and Redux. That's using the ASP.NET Core SPA services framework. Steve Sanderson from the ASP.NET team will be doing a talk on that, I think later this week, might be today. So if you're using any SPA frameworks with ASP.NET Core, please go and check that out. We now have Razor Pages, which is the new page-based framework built into MVC, which I'll have a separate talk on after this one. We have Auth support for Azure B2C. Okay, that's the business to consumer or Azure B2C authentication service out of the box. Two-factor auth now built in using authenticator apps rather than using SMS, which is old and stinky. And we have a much simplified project creation experience in VS than what we did before, which I'll show off. In fact, let's do that right now. So let's go over to VS. This is VS 2017 15.3, freshly updated over hotel Wi-Fi a couple of days ago, which took a while. If I go in here, you'll see now that rather than having 2 entries for ASP.NET Core like we used to, we simply have 1, right? We have ASP.NET Core, web application, and it's at the top. We got a lot of feedback that people were confused when we had 2 here. One said .NET Framework and one said .NET Core, and a lot of people were creating projects on the wrong thing. So now it's more like the old one ASP.NET dialogue, and hopefully the intent is in the future we'll merge these 2 together as well. So ASP.NET can sort of get back to this one ASP.NET dialogue, and you just choose what you want, and you'll spit out the right project. So let me start an ASP.NET Core project, and we've got a couple of new things in here. So this is where I pick whether I want to run on .NET Core or .NET Framework now. Okay, yes, and I know in the previous screen there's that anachronistic drop-down in the top left-hand corner that says .NET Framework versions. That's just an unfortunate throwback from VS 2010. It's still there. We can't really do much about it. Hopefully it'll disappear in a future version. But this is where you select whether you want .NET Core or .NET Framework. Obviously, you can do side by side. So once you've installed ASP.NET Core, or .NET Core 2, I should say, which includes ASP.NET Core 2, all this stuff will just show up, okay? And 1.0 and 1.1 were already in the box in VS, and we add 2.0. If I go back to 1.1, you'll see that I don't have as many templates. And if I go to 2.0, I have all these wonderful new templates. So my web application template is now built using Razor Pages. And if I prefer, I can continue to build HTML generating ASP.NET Core applications using separated model views and controllers. But frankly, I much prefer Razor Pages. And then we have these new Angular, React, and React.js Redux templates. When it comes to auth, we have quite a few more options in here. The default is still no auth, obviously. But if you want to do individual auth, the default is still store it inside the application. But you can now say, hey, I want to go off and use Azure AD B2C to delegate all my auth to the cloud during file new, which is kind of nice. And we still have the same support we had before for single org and multi-org cloud authentication using Microsoft Active Directory in Azure. Or if you're just doing internet applications behind IIS, you can continue to use Windows Auth the same way you have been before. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to pick individual auth and store those accounts in the application. I'm going to go ahead and create that project. All right, so when I create the project, you'll notice that thing had a little like warning triangle on it for a moment, because when you create a project, a NuGet restore takes place. Okay? If we go and have a look in here, we can see in my NuGet dependencies, it's a little simplified from what it was in 1x, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the tooling improvements we've made to improve this inner loop and this file new experience. If I come to the command line, I'm going to do the same thing I did up there, but I'll do it in the command line. Hopefully my mouse doesn't disappear off the lectern here. So if I do .NET New, you see all the templates down here that you've probably seen before. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of templates. Actually, can you see that pretty well? That's pretty good. I'll do .NET New Razor to create myself the same thing I just created in VS. So that was pretty quick. So it says that NuGet took 2 seconds to restore my new project, which isn't too bad. All right. And if I do .NET Restore again, it practically was instant. So it said 50.99 milliseconds for the first restore and 41.28 for the second. Now, why is there 2? Has anyone ever wondered why does NuGet always say it's doing 2 restores when you do a .NET Core project with tools? Well, it's because you have tools. If you go into your CSproj file, see these 2 different types of reference. You have a package reference and you have a .NET CLI tool reference. These are called project tools, and these are just normal packages. NuGet runs those 2 restores in parallel, all right, which is why you get 2 timings at the bottom, right? Just so you know if you've ever wondered why there was 2 there, all right? So NuGet does caching now. So when you restore, if nothing has changed that would affect the NuGet graph in between restore operations, it's basically free, as you can see here, all right? It basically happens instantly. And that's really important because VS does implicit restores now, and .NET New does an implicit restore. So we want to make sure that if you don't need to do a restore, because they're quite expensive, you don't have to do it. So that's good. The second thing that NuGet did is they invented a feature called the NuGet fallback folder. Well, what's the NuGet fallback folder? Well, everyone knows where your NuGet packages get restored to, right? If I go to my user profile, and I actually put a % at the beginning, not a $, going to NuGet, going to packages, this is where all my NuGet packages get restored to by default on this machine. Okay? It goes into my user profile, they get reused for all my projects, life is good. But if I'm a first-time user, or if I'm restoring a new thing I haven't restored before, or I download ASP.NET Core 2 and I install it, we don't want you to have to download the internet to put it in here the first time you create a project. That kind of sucks, right? Or you install it, you turn off your Wi-Fi, you get on an aeroplane, and then you can't create projects because you have no NuGet support. So in the past, we would pre-install a feed somewhere on your machine that you couldn't see, and then first time it would have to copy all of that stuff out of the feed into this location, into your restore location. And if you don't have a lovely fast SSD like I do, that can still take quite a long amount of time, all right? It's a lot of file I/O. So there's a new feature in NuGet called the NuGet fallback folder. And we install one of those for you as part of installing .NET. So in my program files folder, in my .NET home, under SDK, I've got this new folder down here, NuGet fallback folder. And it's immutable. It's in program files. You need to be an administrator to change it. All right? It's read-only. So when you restore now, NuGet will treat this as if it was already part of your NuGet restore location. Okay? Which means that if it's in here, no file I/O has to take place at all. We don't have to get it from the internet or check, and we don't have to copy it from a local feed into your restore location. It's just there. And then when the application runs, it runs out of here. Okay? Anything that was already in here, .NET Core knows how to load assemblies that are in here, and they'll just get loaded from here. So that's why it's one of the reasons we've been able to make .NET new and then sort of that getting started experience so much quicker, thanks to the good work from the NuGet team. Okay. What else is good? So we've got to file new, and then we haven't looked at the content yet. So let's have a talk about what's new in the content. So in the first templates we shipped in ASP.NET Core 1 and 1.1, everything was kind of in the template, right? We didn't have any opinions on how anything should be in the framework at all. You wanted logging, you had to write code to add logging. You wanted a diagnostics page, you had to add code to do a diagnostics page. You wanted configuration. There was no configuration baked into the framework. You had to add a package, you had to new up a configuration object in your startup file, and you would use that. Okay? So we had all these little subsystems, and then it was up to you to compose them together the way you wanted. Sounds great. You only pay for what you get. It just meant that the templates were fairly complicated because you had to do quite a lot just to get going. To get hello world in an idiomatic fashion, you needed a lot of code. So what we did is we took those opinionated, idiomatic style sort of base templates, and they're not really templates. It's like, what infrastructure do I need to get a basic functional app going? And we put them into a new API, webhost.createDefaultBuilder. Okay? Webhost is a static factory class that essentially gives me instances of the webhost builder interface, which we had in 1.0, which is the thing that you use to boot ASP.NET Core. All right? And that's where you compose the host and everything, and then you call run, and that's what starts up ASP.NET Core on your application, called startup.cs, and then you're off to the races. So we have a nice, compact way of doing that now. All your ASP.NET Core packages are now referenced by default when you're on .NET Core. Through one single reference, okay, the ASP.NET Core.all, which means you have a single version number to reason about that covers all of ASP.NET Core, so you get less of that version mismatch hell that you can get with NuGet when you start having lots and lots of packages. And it also means you don't have to find packages to get APIs. They're just there. We automated and defaulted configuration and loggers as part of this default experience, and then we put them in DI. So that you can now just get the default configuration object out of the IOC container anywhere in your application, and you can configure any logger providers that you might have had in DI rather than adding them separately as a separate concern, which can be quite annoying if you have a very complicated logging provider that relies on services that come out of DI. Okay? It would just be nice if the DI container could activate that for you. That's what it does now. Lastly, or the two last things we did, in 1.1, I don't know if anyone ever played with it or saw the demo, the console logger provider enabled you to filter what logs would go to the console based on config files while the application was running. Okay, so you could run the application as a developer, see a bunch of log messages, open up your settings file, change it and save it, and then without restarting your app, those log messages would be filtered for the next request. We've expanded that capability to the entire logging subsystem. So now any logger provider, okay, whether it's a third-party logger provider or one that we ship, gets the benefit of config-driven logging straight out of the box. And then lastly, we enable DI scope validation by default, but only when you're in development, because it will break your applications guaranteed. So DI scope validation is a feature of our IOC container that will throw an exception if it determines that you have registered two dependent types with mismatching scopes. And the reason that's important is that if you do it incorrectly, you can very easily introduce leaks into your application, and more importantly, security issues into your application. Okay? If you register a singleton object that depends on a scoped object, the singleton will activate the scoped object once, and it will live for the life of the application. And then anyone else who wants it will get the singleton version. That's not good. All right? And so this is now turned on by default when you're in development, and if you misconfigure your DI container, it will just throw. Now, if you don't fix it and you deploy to production, it'll just happily go off and keep running. We didn't make it throw in any environment other than development. We thought that was just a little bit too draconian. But we're trying to protect you from yourselves. And to be fair, I say yourselves, we did it ourselves in MVC, and we had to ship a security update to 1.0 because we found that we'd done something wrong. It's very easy to get wrong. Publish size and startup time. So the .NET Core assemblies are now all, and the ASP.NET Core assemblies are now all included in a very special secret folder hidden away as part of your .NET Core installation, which I'll talk about and show in a minute, called the runtime store. And it sounds an awful lot in characteristics like the GAC. But it's not the GAC. It's much better than the GAC. I call it the NuGAC, N-U-G-A-C. But they don't like me calling it that because the GAC has a lot of negative connotations. But it is better than the GAC. So all the things that you put into the runtime store, which includes all of ASP.NET Core and ND Framework Core and all the stuff that we depend on, it gets pre-jittered so that your application startup time is better. So that's good. And you don't have to publish them with your application because they're already in the runtime store. They're part of the .NET Core installation. Okay? So now when you publish up your applications, they're much, much, much smaller by default. Lastly, the Razor View compilation is turned on by default, which also drastically reduces the size of the output of your published app and improves startup time. So we'll have a look at those things. Now, the runtime store is exclusive to .NET Core. It's not a feature of .NET Framework. It is something we've only been able to add in to .NET Core. So let's have a look at all those things that I just talked about. So this is what my new project file looks like for a Razor Pages app that has been configured with auth. Okay? So I have this Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.all package, which quite literally includes everything that the ASP.NET Core team and the EF Core team and the related teams ship, and everything that we depend on. So if we have a Redis provider for our distributed cache abstraction, then we ship StackExchange.Redis's package included inside this meta package. Okay? The SQLite package is included in here. A bunch of Azure stuff is included in here because we light up on top of Azure. But you only have to worry about that one version number. So when we patch any of those things, this will go to 2.01, and then 2.02. And then when we do a minor release, it'll go to 2.1. Okay? And you only have to think about one thing right now. These other things here aren't runtime. These are all to do with tooling, which is why they're separate. And that's why they're marked as private assets all. That means they don't get deployed with your app. All right? And then this section down here, as I said before, are your project tools. All right? So these are the things that give you .NET EF and .NET user secrets and .NET ASP.NET scaffold at the command line. Okay? So much, much simplified package graph, which is nice to see. If I go into my program main, if you think back to what this looked like in 1.1, we've now got this split. We've got the program main that you would typically see in a console app, which calls out to this build webhost.run method. Well, why are they split? This pattern here of having a method that returns an iWebhost for your application hanging off your program class is so that the command line tools can find this without having to enter and start up your application through program main. All right? So things like .NET EF, the command line tool that you run to run migrations, it actually has to start your application to load your configuration, to initialize your DB context from DI in order to run migrations and to add migrations. Okay? It needs to know about your database to do that. And so it uses this hook. Okay? The important thing in here is this calling out to this new method, webhost.createDefaultBuilder. Okay? And this is the one I talked about, the defaults, a whole bunch of the stuff around config and logging and using Kestrel and lighting up behind IES and et cetera, for you by default. Now, you can still customize it. So we still have all the same methods hanging off here that we did before. This just returns an iWebhost builder. It's the exact same API we had in 1.1. And so all the same methods and configuration that was there before is still here. And we've got a couple of new ones as well. Now the configuration is set up for you automatically as part of this. There's a configure app configuration method here that you can use to add configuration providers. All right? Maybe you've written a custom config provider that loads stuff out of, I don't know, a database or a different file format. Okay? You can add that very early in the pipeline by doing that here. Or perhaps you need to configure your logging very early in the pipeline and have it work along with the default logging. You can do that here as well now. But as I said before, by default, we now default a whole bunch of this stuff for you. And the app works pretty well straight out of the box. If we go over to startup.cs, a couple of changes here. We now accept iConfiguration in the constructor of startup, because remember I said iConfiguration is now in the DI container, because we set it up during the previous file. Okay? When I called create default web host builder, it put iConfiguration in DI for me, so I now have that here. I stamp that onto my property, and then I go and do what I normally did. I do configure services, and I do configure to configure my HTTP pipeline. Now, these are a little cleaner because I don't have to configure logging here anymore. I used to have all my logging configuration code set up in the configure method. That's now all done as part of the DI container, and it's done by default as part of that create default web host builder. So I don't need to worry about that. OK. Nicey nice. I'm going to run this. And we'll see some of this default logging stuff in action. So remember, this was a Razor Pages application with authentication turned on by default. Oh, sorry, with individual auth turned on, because I selected it, not by default. All right, so there's my application running. If I come over back to VS over here and I view my output window, you can see that it makes a liar of me, because it's not, there it is, that I've got all the logs coming from the running application under debug now being pumped out to an output source over here, which is kind of nice. To get this experience before, you had to run from the command line, or you had to choose Kestrel as your launch target rather than being behind IIS. So that's nice. Also note that it does the job of prefixing it so that if you've got more than one application running and you've attached to all of them using the debugger, you can differentiate which project is giving you which log, which is kind of nice. But it is just a flat list of information. It's useful, don't get me wrong, but it would be much nicer if we had a richer, more structured logging experience going on here. And luckily, we do. It's enabled by default. So if I scroll up here, you've seen this thing over here, right? The new diagnostic tools window that's been in the debug experience for VS 2017. Well, it's gone through a little bit of revision since VS 2017 came out. And you may have noticed this application insights events summary down here that shows up now. And we can see that it actually has some events being populated. Well, up on the toolbar, there's an application insights button, which has the same number written next to it. So if I click on that, it brings up the application insights search experience, which, as you can see, is populated with all of the data that Application Insights has captured from this application. Now, what does get captured in an ASP.NET Core app by default in VS? Well, every request gets tracked. You can see that up here because it says I made 28 requests, and you can see them here being marked with a little globe. It also captures all log information. So anytime that you call out to iLogger in your application, it'll get mapped to a trace in Application Insights. Anytime we call out to iLog, because all of ASP.NET Core itself and Entity Framework Core also uses the iLogger interface, that will get caught in here as well. So you can see that there are parts of ASP.NET Core logging information over here as part of these requests go through. But furthermore, as I mentioned before, you can change what's going on here on the fly. So I can open up my app settings.development.json file, which controls the configuration of my app when I'm in the development environment, which is what I'm doing here, obviously. And you can see that we defaulted the verbosity level for certain log sources out of the box. So we set default to debug. So all of your messages, if you do them at debug or lower, will come through. Okay? But for system and Microsoft, we set that to information. Now, if you think it's too noisy, you could set these to error. Okay? Actually type error correctly. Come back here and hit F5. And now if I go back to my App Insights search and hit search. Now, it was 89 before. If I hit search this time, note that my most recent ones now are just requests. All those trace messages have gone because I dialed down the verbosity of the Microsoft logs. Or you might be trying to debug something from that you suspect is one of our problems. It's something that we did wrong. So you could turn Microsoft up to trace. Okay? Then we could come back here. I could hit F5 a couple of times on my application, research. And now I've got 149 messages in trace, and I'm getting basically every single message that ASP.NET Core logs under the covers for you. Okay? And if I was making SQL queries through EF, I would see all those show up in here as well. Now, this is a structured logging system, so I can click on any one of these, and you can see all the properties are over here available to you, maintaining their structure. You can search for the properties. You can add them to the current filter, okay? Or you can just come up to the search box and type for anything that you think is anywhere in any of this database of log information, and App Insights will find it for you. Now, this is all completely local. None of this is using App Insights in Azure. This is just an experience that lives in the debugger in Visual Studio, okay? So you don't have to worry about signing up for anything in Azure or any of that type of jazz if you're worried about that, all right? Again, enabled by default when you use VS 2017 out of the box. Okay, let's publish this application and have a look at its output. Let me stop Alt-tabbing, find the right one. There it is. So obviously, I've just been running out of the app directly here. Let me publish the application. I'll just use VS. I'll say I'm going to publish to a folder. Yep, defaults is fine. I'll hit publish. It's going to build first. Now it's doing publish. Blah, 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 publish, 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 running, 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 publish has succeeded. Okay, let's go and look at the output. So that went into bin, it went into release, because publish by default is a release output, publish output. So here is the output of my application for ASP.NET Core 2. There's a whole bunch of things missing, you might be thinking. If you've ever looked at the publish output of your ASP.NET Core 1X app, this should look different to you. Now, first thing you might notice is that by default, we're getting these precompiled views assemblies, and that's because we enable MVC view precompilation by default now in the ASP.NET Core SDK. That also removes all CS.HTML files from your output, because once they're precompiled, you don't need them anymore. All right? They're not going to do you any good to have them in the output, because we don't read them if we find matching ones in the precompiled folder. So we just, in the precompiled assembly. So we just remove them, okay? Saves you a whole bunch of space. We also remove the refs folder. Anyone ever seen the refs folder in the output of their published app, okay? They're the reference assemblies that are required when we runtime compile your Razor files. Well, we're not doing that anymore, so we can delete those as well. That saves you another 3 meg or so. And then the biggest thing is none of the ASP.NET assemblies are there. The only assemblies that are here are the ones that came from your app. Okay, Web Application 29 and its precompiled views. Everything else, .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, Entity Framework, Microsoft extensions, anything else that you've used in that Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.all package is not in here. It's all hidden away in the magical runtime store that I talked about before. So how big is a published app now? So it's under 3 megabytes. This is a Razor Pages app with about 4 pages, oh, it's actually a lot more than 4 pages, it's about 20 pages, because this one has auth. So it has the full auth experience that you've seen, and I'll show you a little bit more of that in a minute. But it's under 3 megabytes now. Okay? Not bad at all. Well, how fast does it start up after I've published it? Well, let's go and try that. So I'm going to go down the command line. We'll clear this out. I'm going to change to that directory. So here I am in the publish output of the thing I just ran. Okay? Or I just published, sorry. And I will execute it. Now, I can't do .NET Run. .NET Run is the developer command. Okay? It compiles your app if it needs to, and then it boots it for development mode. I just want to run the app directly. So I'm just going to run web application, is it 29.dll? Right? Boom, started. Right? You saw how quick that was. Control-C, started. All right? So it's running on localhost 5000. Now, the time for the web server to start listening is a good measurement, but it's not the only one we really care about. If we're serving HTML, there's a lot of stuff that happens on the first request in ASP.NET Core. DI is lazily initiated, MVC is lazily initiated, so we need to really hit it with a request to appreciate how fast it may or may not be. So if I go and hit localhost 5000, okay, it's there, it's done, right? So that started in what? I couldn't even get to 1000, right? So it's much, 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 much quicker to start up now than it was in ASP.NET Core 1X because of all these optimizations that we made. All right? And I challenge you, go off, after you've converted your app, time your current ASP.NET Core 1X app, doing those things I just did, upgrade it to 2.0, and then time it doing the same things again, and then tweet back at me what improvement you got. And if you didn't get an improvement, or God forbid it was worse, let me know that too, and we'll try and figure out why. So the last reason why this is so much faster now was because of that runtime store I talked about. So there is a new command that you can use to control that. Nope, that doesn't look good. Let's go back to the... So this is .NET Store command, which I have to pass help to. And this enables you to put things in this optimized store in a central location on a machine so that you don't have to deploy them with the application, okay? And so that they get optimized and pre-engined, or pre-cross-genned as we call it now, so you don't have to pay as much JIT cost on startup. So where is this store? Where's this magical location, this NuGAC? Don't call it that, because I'll get in trouble. So it's under Program Files, .NET, Store. So if you use our default installers, so on Windows it'll go here, on Mac it goes into whatever the Mac path is, and if you're on Linux and you use like apt-get or whatever, it goes into wherever we do it there. If you download a zip or a tarball, it's included in that, okay, if you get the full one. And there are separate zip and tarballs for those of you who really like finally honing your install for the .NET Core runtime and the ASP.NET Core runtime store, all right? And then you just like compose them together and you get full control. But what's in here? Well, there's my .NET Exe. And in the store folder, I have a bitness folder. Okay, this is the store for things that are targeting .NET Core App 2.0 or .NET Core 2. And then look, it looks like packages, right? It basically looks like packages. It looks like the folder layout of a NuGet application. If I jump into ASP.NET Core, there's a version number, there's a lib folder, net standard 2, and then there's my DLL, all right? And so .NET Core 2 knows how to load stuff out of here if it exists. But, and this is where it's better than the GAC, if you have this DLL in your bin folder, it'll load it from your bin folder. It doesn't care what version it is. It doesn't say, oh, but the one in the store is the same version, so I'll load that. It just says, no, if you deployed it, it wins, all right? Those of you who have ever dealt with the GAC and have had to diagnose why it is your assembly in your bin folder is not being loaded, it's because something in the GAC has taken it over, all right? Hopefully you're very happy to hear that that's the case, all right? So bin always wins on .NET Core. All right, but we do get the benefits of a central location where it's optimized. All right, so let's talk about some little features that we've added. I've just talked about very underlying things and stuff to do with the startup cycle. What about features? So we have some small ones. As I said, it was a fairly small release milestone. I-hosted service. Who does background work in their ASP.NET Core apps? Like who starts up a background thread to do anything? Listen to a RabbitMQ queue or like monitor a file. Okay, a couple of things come up. If you want to have that activated by the dependency injection system, by the container, which is what you really want, right? And then you want to be notified when the app is starting and then when it's shutting down. That's a little hard to do today. So we now have a service interface that's in the box by default that you can implement, and then we automatically discover these out of the DI container, and we activate them for you. We call start on them and we call stop on them, and it's as simple as that, okay? In the future, we see this becoming the very foundation of that web host class. That whole idea of having program main, start up a host, and say run is all built on this idea. The web servers in the future will probably implement I-hosted service, because all a server is in ASP.NET Core is something in the container that gets activated after it's configured. It says go, and then it starts listening and dispatching requests. Right? The container doesn't know any different. It doesn't care. And the host doesn't know any different. It doesn't care. It just wants things to call start on. And then when someone shuts down the host, it wants things to call stop on. Okay? So if you're doing any type of health monitoring or doing message bus queue or any type of receiving and stuff, this is a good candidate. And we will ship implementations of I-hosted service moving forward to do common things like, hey, I want to DQ stuff from RabbitMQ, or hey, I want a circuit breaker pattern that's implemented as a global thing in my app. We'll ship those in the box. They're going to come in 2.1, all right? So as an example, this is what it looks like. It's pretty straightforward. It's an interface with two methods called start async and called stop async, all right? Don't block in either of these. Well, you can block on stop, but don't block in start. Right? The idea here is that we call start async in serially, and we wait for the task to return, and then we move on, all right? If you need to start off some type of background operation, you would fire off a different task or a different thread in your start async, and then when the stop call is made, you would then go off and coordinate shutting that down, okay? So you still have to deal with multi-threaded programming and all that type of stuff. You don't get away from that, but now you have a nice hook in the system for doing that. All right, Kestrel. Who loves Kestrel? Come on. ASP.NET Core Kestrel is fantastic. Super, super fast server. We wrote it from scratch. C#, it runs everywhere. But we've never let you run it directly on the internet. If you were not putting it behind IIS or Nginx, we would say, sorry, you're not supported. So we did a whole bunch of work in ASP.NET Core 2 to add limits to Kestrel, and then we set them to recommended levels by default in the box, so that if you ring us up now and say, I'm running Kestrel and it's directly against the internet, we will still support you, all right? So we've hardened it. What else? So what type of things? So we've got like request limits, so maximum number of concurrent connections and concurrent requests, and then most importantly, things like timeout limits. So all the various stages of requests, When the connection is first made, when the request comes in, when the headers are being parsed, the number of headers, the size of the request body, how many bytes per second are being transferred on the request body, how many bytes per second is the client reading the responses I'm sending them, et cetera, et cetera. We have limits for all those things now, and they're all set by default. In all cases, they're set to limits that are the same as or better than IIS. All right? So you should be good. And you can change them all. Right? They're set, but they're all fully documented, and you can go and change them all. Now, if you change them to values less than our defaults, then you're on your own. We're not going to support you quite as much in that case. All right? We still do generally recommend that in most cases, you should be putting Kestrel behind some type of reverse proxy, because it's not a full-blown web server. It's an application server. Okay? But we have done the work now to add these limits. So if you really, really, really need to, you can directly expose it now. This is really good for like scenarios where you're running lots of microservices and you want them to talk to each other as fast as possible with the lowest latency and stuff. There's no need to put them behind anything in those cases, and you can still have your limits to protect them in that case. All right, authentication. The auth system in 1x had some problems. It was completely rebuilt for ASP.NET Core, and we shipped it, and then people started using it, and then they used it in ways we didn't intend, and then we accidentally broke them in 1.1 because we fixed bugs that people had taken dependencies on. So we went back to the drawing board in 2.0, and we worked with the community, especially those who own and maintain some of the largest identity sort of projects, and we redesigned the authentication system. So now you have a single authentication middleware that sits in the pipeline, and you configure all of your authentication in services. Okay? We have authentication handlers that live in the DI container that you can configure separately, and then they all sort of participate in the global problem or solution area of doing authentication for your app. Okay? It is a breaking change from 1x. You can't just take an app that used auth in 1x, change a couple of packages, and then recompile it. You will get compilation errors. All right? We moved things around in order to avoid ambiguity between the old API and the new API. All right? So we deprecated and deleted some properties hanging off HTTP context, and we added some new ones. All right? And you'll see that there's a very good doc that talks about all of this out of the box. On good news, because, I mean, that's good news, but breaking changes are never fun, we have now added two-factor auth support using QR codes, or TOTP, in the templates by default. So let's have a look at that, because that's kind of fun to show. So if I run this application, this is the one I was using before. I did select authentication and auth when I created it. I can come up to register. Let me register a new user without accidentally hitting whatever key that was. Do that. I have to put in a ridiculously complex password by default. So I should get an EF error because I haven't run my migrations on this app yet. So I get that nice developer EF migration page. I can hit apply migrations. That will set up my database eventually. Come on, don't fail me now. There it goes. It says refresh the page. Continue. OK, so now I am registered. So I can click on here to go to my manage thing. And we redesigned the manage account page because, frankly, it was ugly before. So we did a little bit of work to make it nice. So we have these little pills over here now that kind of separate the different things. And importantly, we have support for two-factor auth in the template with no further setup required by default. I kind of lied. A little bit of setup is required. But it's fully functional without doing anything. So I can hit add authenticator app. But you'll note there's something missing here. So I've got my code, but I don't have my QR code. I can't scan it with my phone. Right? There's a link here that says to enable QR code generation, please read our documentation. So I did that. So where's the docs? Oh, I shut it down. Well, that was silly of me. Let's open it again. Currently, that FW link goes to a GitHub issue, which isn't particularly good. They need to get that fixed. So I just went to the docs website, which is here, and I typed QR in here, and look at that. Enabling QR code generation, ASP.NET Identity. This is for 2.0. So all I need to do is grab a JavaScript file, and I need to dump that in here, and then I'll get QR code generation. So let's do that. I've already downloaded this JavaScript file. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder. And the reason we don't ship this in the templates is basically just legal reasons. We didn't want to ship some random JavaScript file off the internet without doing the full sort of fidelity that we usually do. And once we put it in VS, we have to support it forever. So the plan long term is that once we get server-side imaging back in .NET Core, which we hope to do in the next year, then we'll just have the templates use that to generate you a QR code by default. Or if some enterprising individual in the community wants to build an amazing C#-based QR code generation library that works on .NET Standard in the next few months, I'll happily include it in the template and promote your library. That would be awesome. But in the meantime, I have to use this JavaScript file over here, QR code. I'm going to drop that into my www root, put it in lib. I'll just put it straight in the root. There it is, QR code and QR code min.js. Then, if I go over to my pages folder, go into the account folder, go into manage, and enable the enable authenticator CSHTML, which is that page I was just on. There, all I have to do now is add a script block down here that loads that particular file. So let me do that. I'm going to copy and paste it out of the templates. There we go. So I load the file. Not quite sure why they have this in here. That seems like a throwback, doesn't it? All right, so we load the file, and then we go off and we create the QR code by pointing at the element that was already in the template. I should also put a tilde in front of that, really. All right, so that should be all I have to do. If I go back to my application now, and I hit F5, I now have a QR code. So in theory, I could exit out of my presenter timer. I could grab my Authenticator app, just my Google Authenticator app, hit plus, scan a barcode. Trust me, I'm actually going to scan a barcode. And I'll do this here. All right, so now I have a code. It's told me my code for web application 29 is 092316. Hit verify. So now I have enabled two-factor auth, and it's showing me the recovery codes. All right, so remember, once you've enabled two-factor auth, if you lose your phone, you're screwed. You can't sign in, all right? Unless you have saved one of these recovery codes. And then you're able to use a recovery code to reclaim your auth if you do so. So if I was going to be really clever, I'd take a photo or something of these now, but this is just a throwaway demo app, so I don't care. So if I click on two-factor auth now, you can see that I've got new buttons because I've configured it. I can turn it back off again, or I can get my recovery codes or get new ones. So let's sign out, and we'll sign back in now that I've got two-factor auth enabled. So I'll go back in, Damian at damianedwards.com. Hopelessly complicated password. All right, so now it's asking me to put in my authenticator code. So let me bring up my app. It is now changed to, you know how it counts down to the next one, and when you're right there, like a couple seconds away, you panic, and then you inevitably make a mistake, and then it times out, and you have to start all over again. All right, so now I've signed in. Two-factor auth, pretty much out of the box, just a couple lines of code to get the QR code, and we get that out of the box now with ASP.NET Core 2. Now, just incidentally, we did have stuff before in the templates for doing two-factor auth with SMS. If you recall, it required quite a lot more setup because you had to enable an SMS provider. You have to sign up for SendGrid or something like that, write a bunch of code. But more importantly, SMS now it just isn't considered quite as secure because if the attacker knows your phone number, they can kind of start mimicking your phone and get your SMSs being sent to them and all types of horrible things. So QR codes and top P are just generally considered a better approach to doing this now, so that's why we do it by default. All right. What have we done in Razor? I'm not going to talk about Razor pages, that's the next talk, but what else have we done? Well, we now support C# 7.1, which we didn't before because we made a mistake. In ASP.NET Core 1, C# 7 came out, but Razor only supported C# 6, and then we had a bug. So we've fixed that bug now, and you can, if you've opted into the latest C# features in your project, which is still opt-in, you can get that stuff working in Razor now. You can also automatically inject content into the head and body elements of pages now using iTagHelper component, which is a new feature in ASP.NET Core 2. Well, iTagHelper component is like a tag helper, but you don't use it directly. It's a small thing that looks like a tag helper from a class point of view, but it gets consumed by other tag helpers that have actually attached to real tags. Okay? So we have a head and body tag that are in the framework, and they're turned on by default, so that you can write iTagHelper components that can light up against the head tag and the body tag, essentially to inject content into your page automatically. All right? We have better support for tag helpers in the tooling, which is nice. And we have this whole thing called Razor pages, which I'm going to talk about after this. So let's have a quick look at some of the things in Razor. I have to enable. I can go ahead and enable C# 7.1. So if I go into the properties of my application, go to Build, and then I go down to Advanced Features. I don't know why they hide it in Advanced, honestly. There's all these scary things with addresses and stuff, but this is the one we want. I want to change from latest major version to latest minor. So the C# team, 7.1 is their first minor version ever. They've only ever shipped language versions with major versions of VS. This is the first time they've ever shipped a version of C# that isn't with a new major version of VS, okay? And so rather than just fast forward everyone to 7.1, they decided that they're going to require customers to opt in to the newest minor features, which is fine. So I can do that, hit OK. And now my application will compile using C# 7.1. If I go to the project file just to see what it did, all it really did was add this lang version thing down here. Now, again, I kind of got bit by the property page there, so I'm just going to delete the condition, and I'm just going to put it there. All right? So I'm now telling CSproj that I just want, yes, reload all. I'm telling CSproj that I just want to use the latest version of C# the whole time. All right? Now, Razor will honor whatever you've set in your CSproj file. It's not separate. We just read that config, and you can use that now. So what type of things can you do? Well, there is an interesting feature in C# 7 using static. Has anyone used that? Anyone seen that? No? So it allows you to import a static class as a using, like a namespace, and then all of the methods on that static class now become part of like the global namespace. I thought it was a little odd. I'm like, why would you ever globally import system.math and then just want to call the cosine function? That seems a little silly. But with Razor, it's actually kind of cool, because what you can do is go into your view imports. And remember, view imports are the things that apply to all Razor files in this folder and everything underneath, right? They cascade. And then you can put using static in here. Right? So I could do system.math as an example, and then I could go into a Razor file, so like my index file. And now in here, I could do cosine. Right? So now I've got the cosine function directly like it was on my page because it's been globally imported. What's probably a little more useful is that who's ever created a custom Razor base class before? Okay, a couple of nods. OK. So that's fine, right? You can create, usually you end up doing that to put utility methods and stuff on it so you don't have to inject it everywhere. Well, with this feature, you can just create a static, as long as the methods you have are just static, just put them in a static class, put one line in your view imports, and now they're in every single file in your application. You don't have to change the base class, which we know can introduce sort of ball of mud type scenarios where now you've got a different base class, and like changing it in the future can be problematic because if we change our base class in 2.1, we could break you, and like that's not a good thing. So I think this is a much cleaner way of like adding universal helper methods to all of your Razor files. So that's a really, really cool feature, a way to use that cool feature in C# inside Razor now, which I thought was kind of nice. OK. Let me quickly build an tag helper component, and then we will finish up. So I'm going to add a folder, and we'll call it tag helpers because we want to be tidy. And then in here, I will add, not that, in here I'll add a class. And we'll call it the console hello tag helper component. I should have chosen a smaller name. It would have been easier to type. All right, tag helper component is what I derive from. Let me bring that in. It looks very much like a tag helper. I can override process, which is what I'm going to do. Okay. And then in here, I'm just going to say if context, well, I'm going to say if string.equals context.tag name. So if I'm in the body tag, if I'm in the body, and I'll just do an ordinal indoor case so that it's case insensitive. If I'm in the body tag, I want to inject a little bit of JavaScript at the bottom of the page. All right? So you can already do stuff in tag helpers where rather than having to read all the content and manipulate it, you just want to put something at the beginning or put something at the bottom. So I can do that here. Output.post. Okay, so post content or post element. Well, I'm going to target the body tag. So I want it after the content in the body tag, but before the closing body tag. So post content.append HTML. And then I'll just hard code a JavaScript tag in here. And we'll say hello out on the console. Console.log. And I'll say hello from, and I'll make this a interpolated string. Let's use all the C# features. And I'll do name of, because that's a great feature as well. And we'll do console hello, hello, OK, so that builds. Doesn't it? Yes. Shift F6, build started. Come on, quicker, please. I'm running out of time. Excellent. Startup CS. Now I just have to tell the system about it. Well, that's easy. I just have to add it to the DI container. We just find them. So add a transient tag helper component. Bring that in, and it was called console hello tag helper component. Right? Done. I've put it in DI. Let me go back to my page. I'll bring up the console with F12, and I'll hit F5. Now, it's going to automatically fail because I have to relaunch it, apparently. Let's do that. Control F5 to launch the app. Bring up the console if I'm quick. And then right down the bottom here, you can see now I have my hello from console hello tag helper component. So what's that useful for? Well, we use that primarily for telemetry and diagnostics types libraries. So application insights, when it gets lit up in Azure by default, like you saw me doing in the debugger before, we also do that in Azure now. So when you deploy this to Azure App Service, you can get that feature running in there. We add JavaScript as part of the Azure tracking, and we can track page views for you without you having to do anything to your application. Okay? Really kind of nice. I know people used to do that type of stuff in system web using like a response filter, and you'd look at the outgoing stream, and you would like look for the end of the HTML tag, and then you would put stuff. Horrible. This is much, much, much easier. Super nice improvement. So the Azure integration to finish. Automatic Azure App Service diagnostics. If you deploy ASP.NET Core 2 to Azure App Service, the App Service Diagnostics blade, where you can turn on application logging, just works now. You don't have to add packages or call methods. It just works. Okay? And you can get stream logging and all that stuff. If you want to get application insights running, no code required. You get this banner that says, click here to turn on application insights for this ASP.NET Core application. You click it, you say, yes, use this application insights resource or create a new one, restarts the app, and now App Insights is running in your app. Again, no packages to add, no config to add, no instrumentation key to find, nothing. It's just all automatic, and it's running in your application in Azure. Very, very nice. All right, lastly, we do have ASP.NET Core Docker images. Who's using Docker? Okay, please make sure you use the ASP.NET Core images, not the .NET Core images. Okay, ASP.NET Core images are pre-configured to make ASP.NET Core work. The .NET Core ones aren't. All right, so please use those ones, and they've all been updated. We really want to help customers get to 2.0 now. Now that 2.0 is out and has unblocked a lot of things, we want you to get onto 2.0 quickly. To that end, later this year, you'll see us release a Windows Compat Pack that will add back to .NET Core, when you're on Windows, things that you might be relying on that are keeping you on .NET Framework. Namely, system.directory services if you're calling out to LDAP or Active Directory. System.drawing if you need to do server-side imaging. And system.service process if you want to do Windows service hosting for self-hosted applications. You'll see that get released later this year. Hopefully that will help a lot of customers move off .NET Framework onto .NET Core if they're looking for the benefits of .NET Core. And lastly, ASP.NET Core SignalR, which I know a lot of people are waiting for. We will have an alpha of that out in the next month that you will be able to run on top of 2.0 so that you can start at least giving us feedback on the new SignalR. But the actual release of SignalR will not come until ASP.NET Core 2.1. Okay? Which we're planning right now. So if you want to get involved in the next version, if you're really at the bleeding edge, jump onto GitHub, go look at the stuff that we're talking about now, the stuff that we're coding, and give us feedback super, super early. Thank you. That was an overview of ASP.NET Core 2.0. If you want to see what Razor Pages is about, stick around, or I'm going into room 3, I think it is, to talk about Razor Pages next. Otherwise, please try ASP.NET Core 2 and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.